Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails is brought to you by Redneck Blinds, Day 6 Arrows, Code of Silence Apparel, Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail, Fuse Accessories, and Hoyt. Thanks for joining us today on Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. It's a lot better day for taking a nap than it is for turkey hunting. We gave it a try, but the birds just weren't active at all. But Jordan did have a pretty high quality nap.
One of the best ever. I think definitely on my top 5 list of best naps.
Yeah, it was cool. We saw a few deer.
Rough grouse.
Yeah, we heard a rough grouse drumming. And that's a big deal here because one of the priorities on this property is to reestablish rough grouse. When I was a boy, that was one of my favorite things to do, was grouse hunting. And the population's been declining ever since then. And all of the experts that I've talked to say that it's related to habitat. So we're really going to focus on that. Obviously the deer are important, but I think if I had to pick between, average deer hunting and, have a bunch of grouse and or awesome deer hunting and no grouse, I'd pick the average deer and get the grouse back in here. So
because that's kind of the whole point of the goat prairie restoration that they've been working on, right? Is to establish more grouse habitat.
Yeah, that one's a little bit less that way. It's more just restoring the native vegetation on those open slopes. But grouse habitat is really very similar to deer habitat. They do like the aspens. So one of the primary practices is to take a chainsaw and cut the aspen trees down so they resprout. That's a big deal. But grouse like smaller trees and lots of them. The mature timber is where the problem comes in. So anyway, we need to talk about, what were we going to talk about today? Whether or not, or how smart are whitetail bucks? I think it's a really important question because I think if you give them too much credit, you don't hunt them aggressively enough. You don't hunt them right. You're too cautious. You're always afraid that they've got your number. And I've sure had enough bucks over the years that I thought that was the case. They seemed like no matter what I did, they were one step ahead of me. So we're going to dive into that in today's episode. And I've got one buck in particular that's a poster child for that process. And maybe as we're talking about that deer, we'll come up with a couple others that we can talk about too. But I started hunting a deer in 2009 that I nicknamed the Double G4 buck. And I ended up killing him in 2012 when he was 7 years old. So I started hunting him when he was 4. I was aware of the deer when he was 3. I passed him up as a 3-year-old. As a 4-year-old, I was trying to kill him. And I think I saw him 3 times, hunted him all season, and had a pretty good grasp of where his range was. It was pretty good sized range too. I mean, I think it was, at that time, several hundred acres. 300 to 400 acres probably. And then I didn't get him, saw him 3 times. Then as a 5-year-old, I had a couple of nighttime pictures of this deer. I never saw him. I hunted him for 50 days, never saw the buck. And that was really frustrating to go that long hunting one deer and never seeing him. So then that would have been 2010, so 2011, when he was a 6-year-old, he started showing up on trail cameras again in September. And I was kind of like, even though he was gigantic, it kind of gave me a queasy feeling. Like, oh, dang it, I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to hunt this deer every single day. I'm never going to see him. I'm going to not waste, but I'm going to invest, so to speak, another season on hunting a deer that's not killable. That was my fear. So I was almost reluctant, to even think about hunting him. Well, that year, he was one of the most visible deer on the whole farm.
As a 5-year-old.
As a 6-year-old.
6-year-old.
Yep. It's sort of like a light switch flipped, and he went from being the least visible deer on the property, 50 straight days, no sightings, a couple of nighttime trail camera pictures. I know he was on the farm because, well, I assume he was on the farm. I didn't have cameras all over the place, but then as a 6-year-old, his range had gotten smaller, and he was daylight active, and I could get on that deer almost every time I went into his core area. And I had tons of daylight trail camera pictures of him. almost killed him that season. I hit him. He ducked the string. We talked about string jumping in a recent episode. He ducked, loading up his legs to run away. I hit him high in the hump and never got him. So that was his 6-year-old season. And as a 7-year-old, he was the same again. Same area. His core or his range may have shrunk down even more. But again, he was the most visible deer in that whole area. He would be the first one out, in the afternoon. He was so easy to find. So anyway, the point is, was he really smart as a 4 and a 5-year-old? Did he get dumb, as he got older? It's unlikely that he got dumb. You'd think that he would have acquired more experience, would have gotten smarter. So the conclusion I came to with that buck was that the reason I wasn't seeing him was not because he was outsmarting me. It's because he was nocturnal. He wasn't moving during the daylight. And that was an eye-opener for me. They aren't smart, so to speak. They have these instincts that have been honed by years of trying to stay alive. But if you give them credit for being smart, like able to think, like what is a hunter going to do today? Or I'm going into this funnel, that must be a dangerous spot because, that's where they can kill me with a bow. I mean, all that stuff makes sense to us.
They're not critically thinking.
Mm-mm.
No.
No, they can't figure stuff out. So we give them credit for that. And you hear the story of the phantom buck or whatever it might be. There's 2 reasons he's a phantom. Either he's just naturally, by his own physiology, a nocturnal buck, or he's had so many experiences with hunters that he just doesn't come out during the day.
So you say they can't figure stuff out, but they can learn and recognize patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can sense danger and they can react to it.
Right.
And they can remember it.
So that, yeah.
But they can't think ahead.
Right.
They can't think, okay, this is what people are going to be doing. All they can do is think this is what people have done, or this is where danger exists.
So if they've never seen you or smelled you or known that you're there, they would have no reason to suspect.
No.
Right.
And that's why our farm, I felt like, was so easy to hunt, was because the deer had so little negative experience with people.
Right.
But yet they were still, in a lot of cases, very nocturnal. You still have those ghost years. I remember Mark Drury used to call them that, the age 4 and age 5, the bucks, it was their ghost years. Fairly easy to kill as 3-year-olds, covered a lot of ground during the rut, but then as they get into 4 and 5, they just don't move as much. They're not smarter. They didn't get smarter. Maybe they gained a little experience in areas with heavier hunting pressure, but even on our farm where there wasn't very much hunting pressure, they became really hard to kill.
Do you know what makes them nocturnal in those years? Does every buck become nocturnal, or is it just dependent on the deer?
It depends on the deer to a certain extent, but as a trend, they all tend to be more nocturnal as 4 and 5-year-olds than they are during any other time in their lives, in my experience. And those are the years when, in most cases, in areas that have decent whitetail hunting, that's the age class of bucks that we're trying to kill. I mean, there's places that have a lot of hunting pressure where a 2-year-old is a trophy, or for sure a 3-year-old. Like I've got buddies in Pennsylvania, and for them, a 3-year-old is a realistic trophy. They don't expect to really see those deer get to be 4 or 5, or like we have occasionally those older age class deer.
Right.
So it's relative. Those bucks, if they aren't pressured, are not typically nocturnal. The ones that let's say it's a matter of attrition, survival of the most nocturnal, if you want to call it that. So let's say you're a buck in Pennsylvania, and as a 2-year-old you're a daytime roamer. You're probably going to get shot. Whereas here in Iowa, or on properties that we've owned, we don't shoot them. So even on public land, people don't even shoot those deer usually.
Right.
So they don't get killed. So then you've got one with that personality, let's say, to be more of a daylight roamer. Well, now he makes it to age 3 and maybe gets lucky and makes it to 4. He's going to carry those traits with him. But in states with heavy hunting pressure, because that trait makes him more vulnerable, he just doesn't make it to that age.
So it's more of just like the genetics. It makes their chances of survival more likely, the ones that tend to be nocturnal. Therefore, they live longer and their genetics get passed down.
That's right.
That trait.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't even know how much of that is genetic. I don't know where it comes from. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also this kind of a time frame in October where the physiology kicks in again, and they just become very nocturnal for several weeks, the first, say, 3 weeks of October, it's pretty rare, to find a daylight active buck during that time frame, with any age at all, even young ones. They just almost all disappear. So, maybe what we're really talking about is not whether or not they're smart. We can cover that in another topic about what they learn and how long they remember stuff. Really, it comes down to, are the ones that are killable, that have those behavioral traits that make them easier to kill, are they getting old enough to even be trophies, in a lot of areas? So that's just something to keep in mind. So the point is, don't give them too much credit for being smarter than you, of knowing, how to outmaneuver us. They don't think like that. They are either nocturnal, or they're dead in a lot of places, or if they weren't nocturnal, they learned enough bad lessons. We got a lot of dog bone chewing going on over here. So that wasn't Jordan and me chewing on a deer leg.
No, thankfully. We still have some food left. It hasn't gotten that desperate on the farm yet.
Yeah, we got some stuff in the fridge.
It would be time to take a trip to Quick Star if we were chewing on deer bones.
Yeah, deer legs were the best we could come up
Yeah.
with. So, gosh, now I lost my train of thought.
You said yesterday when we were talking about this that if the deer if you can't find them and you feel like they're outsmarting you, it's either because they're nocturnal, they're not there,
right,
or they caught on.
Right. Yeah. So if you're hunting in an area with a lot of hunting pressure, it's really tough, because you can't control then whether or not they catch on.
Right.
But if you're not, like, let's say you're hunting an area with average hunting pressure or less, and even in Iowa, there's some public areas that just don't get a lot of pressure, so it's not like you have to be hunting private land only. But, you get these spots where the deer, they aren't learning these lessons enough to say, well, I'm not going to go down that trail anymore.
Right.
Because the last 2 times I went down there, I smelled that guy, or I saw him in the tree, or whatever. They're just naturally nocturnal. Or again, you can hunt spots where the deer just don't exist.
Right.
So if you're getting a lot of pictures of a buck at night and you think this is the deer I'm going after, he's not necessarily going to be killable, because some of that is still baked into them, their personality, especially in those age classes, where they're just nocturnal by nature. So we'll come back and talk some more about that, especially, like I said, how they learn and what they learn, and how that translates into how you hunt them, as they become more educated. That's a challenge. It's probably the number one challenge that we face, is not how do you kill them on farms like this.
Right.
I mean, that's not super hard. I mean, if they're moving, if they're not being pushed, they're going to be, or bumped, they're going to be moving naturally.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're going to be moving in daylight, but whatever their natural tendency is, you can fall back on that.
Right.
But as soon as you hunt them in places where there's a lot of pressure, all bets are off as to, how effective you're going to be. So anyway, hopefully that you pulled something from that. Bucks are generally nocturnal during certain phases of their life. Again, if they make it to age 4 and 5, those are the typical ghost years. They're generally October is a nocturnal month for at least the first 3 weeks. And then any place where they've learned the hard way, or literally the bucks that tend to be daytime roamers. I hear a lot of bones.
Yeah.
The bucks that tend to be daytime roamers are dead already. That's the other part of it. But
So basically, don't give them too much credit.
Yeah.
They're not as smart.
No, hunt them aggressively.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to hunt them, where it makes sense to hunt them. Don't be so nervous about the fact that they might have figured you out. It's less likely if you're hunting, smart locations where your entry and exit isn't, obvious to the deer, and they're not smelling you or seeing you on stand. They don't know that you're hunting them. If you're not killing them, they haven't figured you out. They're just either not moving in daylight, typically, or, that's the main thing. So we'll come back and talk about, we could talk more. Let's talk a little bit more about nocturnal bucks and how you kill them. I wish you would tell me how to do it, because as a bow hunter, it's really hard to kill a nocturnal buck. We need to show some more of these.
It's just like crunchy.
Yeah, we're in a. Where is he on there?
There's Duke enjoying his bone, and Bentley enjoying his bone. I mean, to be fair, if I was a yellow lab or a golden retriever on a 70-degree April morning, I'd probably be doing the same thing.
I'm glad you're not, Jordan.
Yeah.
Because we're running out of deer bones.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's talk real quick about how do you hunt nocturnal bucks. And I know there's lots of people that think that there's a system that you can, employ, maybe to keep the deer busy, keep them on their feet longer. Put a bunch of mock scrapes out. Keep them occupied so that they just don't get to their beds as early, or whatever the case may be. I've never seen that actually work myself. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. The only experience that I've had with being successful on nocturnal bucks is to hunt right where they bed, or near where they bed. As close as you can get to where they bed. That's it. That's the whole game then. And
question about that though, don't those tend to be in those depths of your farm areas that you don't want to hunt too frequently because you don't want to pressure them? Like we've talked about it on past episodes, those really high quality areas where like you would be kind of stressed out if someone was walking around in your living room.
Yeah.
Like the deer are kind of stressed out if you are walking around where they sleep.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that?
There are places on this farm that if we tried to hunt them, the deer would know. You might get away with a couple hunts, and that's the risk versus reward part of it. Like if we had a really good suspicion of where a buck that we were after was bedding, we knew that we were never going to see him during daylight. You'd take a chance at it.
Right.
But you got to go in early in the morning. You're not going to hunt that deer in the afternoon, or you got to flank him and get as close to his bed as you can without actually going right to it. That's where I believe that's where the success is going to be. And we'll talk about like green light situations for other times of the season when the bucks are more likely to move during daylight. Did we cover everything, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the actual takeaway?
The takeaway, well, my takeaway was that if you're not seeing the deer and you're thinking, where is this deer? He's either not there, nocturnal,
Yep.
or he knows that, like, he's picked up on your efforts to hunt him.
Right.
He didn't figure it out. He just observed your patterns. And then the nocturnal takeaway was that your best chance would be hunting their bedding areas or the edges of them.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit dicey, and there's no real good way to hunt nocturnal deer.
Yeah, and it's tough with a bow. I mean, with a gun you can use deer drives and you can push them out, but with a bow you're kind of stuck with natural movement. So if I get any revelation on how to hunt nocturnal bucks, I'll let you know, but over my career I've had very poor success with it. And
do you just have to hope that they live long enough to become not nocturnal anymore?
That's right. Yeah. Or like I said, there's green flags. There are 3 situations where even a buck that's primarily nocturnal can be vulnerable. And I guess we might as well lay them out. We can talk about those separately in future episodes. But, one is a cold front in October. Every time there's a cold front coming through, there's some chance that those bucks that are almost entirely nocturnal make an appearance during daylight. The second situation is going to be the first hot doe in his core area. That can be as early as the last part of October. Generally, it's somewhere between, say, October 29th and November 3rd. Somewhere in there, he can slip up because that first hot doe really pulls him out of that nocturnal state. The third time is during the late season if it's really cold and there's food. Those bucks can be really vulnerable then. Another example of that was a deer that I call Loppy. And we hunted Loppy on and off for, 3 or 4 years. Never saw him. We never even got daylight pictures of Loppy. But I finally killed him in late December of 2012, and it was a super cold evening right after a cold front had gone through. So high pressure, super cold, and he was coming out to food. So that sometimes is the third situation, where you can get these bucks. So,
and they're just hungry and desperate.
yeah, well, yeah, and they're stressed.
Yeah.
For some reason, they let their guard down at that time. So those are the I would say the green light opportunities for primarily nocturnal bucks. So now you know why they are nocturnal, and now hopefully a little bit of idea of how to go about hunting them. Well, that's it for today. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you right back here again for the next episode of Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. And remember to
always dream big.